Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Zara and today I am going to be doing a review of Dune Messiah by Frank Herbert. Now, I read Dune a few years ago and I really enjoyed it. I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I would, but I liked it. I thought it was a really solid sci-fi read and I was very excited to pick it up. So I've been really looking forward to Dune Messiah though, because I heard that the book was basically an extended epilogue of the first book, and it's very much focused on Paul and his struggle. And so I was very curious about how it was going to differ to book one. And overall, I have to say, I loved it. Now, I feel like that's quite an unpopular opinion. Most of my friends on Goodreads who have read it rated it like 3 stars, even sometimes 2 stars. But I loved it. It was so good. What did I love about it? I love the fact that this book is so introspective. I love the fact that it's almost like we are in Paul's thoughts and we're in some of the other characters' thoughts. It feels very intimate. We are getting a zoomed up look at how these characters feel about the events. It's super satisfying to read. I am a very character driven reader and I think this book is very character centric, even more so than book one. And that's what made it feel very kind of epic, but in a psychological sense, if that makes sense. The second thing that I loved about it, as an extension of my first point, was the characters. I really like that we get a lot more time with Paul. I really like that we get really a lot of insight into how he thinks. He has a lot of interesting reflections on what it means to be a leader, the responsibility you have as a leader, and what it's like to be as a leader who leads by command. There's certain points in this book that he says certain things, and it's such an interesting way to frame what it means to be a ruler of a country or a planet or whatever. One of the things that I love in my books is these really kind of meta-philosophical conversations where there's not really a right or wrong answer. And I love the fact that Paul comes at it almost from the kind of antithesis of what we normally get in fantasy. What we normally get in fantasy is rulers who are very fair and they're very, kind of democratic, and it's very much, they're the hero. But in this, Paul is very much portrayed as a hero, but in this specific book, he comes across as quite a jaded individual, and he is debating the merits of being that kind of typical heroic leader versus somebody who maybe takes the approach more akin to despotism. He actually references Genghis Khan and Adolf Hitler. I just thought it was such a breath of fresh air to get that perspective. The other characters that I really liked were Aaliyah, Chani, and Irulan. Lots of really interesting female characters that I wish we had just got more time with. I really like Chani in this book. I mean, we get, there's a whole kind of subplot with Chani that I'm not going to go into because it's a spoiler. I mean, we don't get that much time with her in the first book from what I remember. And I feel like in this book, she really is shaping up to be quite a compelling character. And I think her motivations for what she does and what she says are very compelling and are very interesting, and are something to be, talked about maybe in a kind of spoiler-filled video. The other character that I really loved was Aaliyah. She was actually probably my favorite character because she's just so kind of conflicting. I mean, I think she's kind of in it for herself. She wants to protect herself, which I totally get. But at the same time, she comes across as quite selfish, and she comes across as somebody who's quite single-minded in certain ways. I feel like she's very human in that regard. I feel like most humans, we're all contradictions in some ways, and I think she is a representation of that, and I really enjoyed it. I really liked one of her sub-storylines that also I won't talk about just in case of spoilers, but she was a very compelling character, and I've heard there is actually a book about her and one of the other characters, from what I understand, later on in the series, which I'm debating whether I should read it, because I've heard the later books get very weird, but I don't know. If you've read it, let me know down below. The other character that I really liked was Irulan. I like Irulan's character because she's really the center of a lot of the political intrigue in this book. And I think her character, again, she's very human because she feels very conflicted about what is happening around her. And again, that's something that I think we can all identify with. I wish we had had a little bit more time with her and Chani, actually. I wish we'd had more of their perspectives, but this book is very short, so it's to be expected that we didn't get as much time as maybe we would have wanted. The next thing that I loved, and I mentioned it very briefly, was the political intrigue in this book. I didn't mind the politics in Dune. I thought it was okay, but I feel like Herbert really shines with the politics in this book. It feels very detailed, it feels very rich, it feels like, there's always something going to be happening, that it feels like any one person could potentially betray any other one person, and it really ups the stakes. It really put me on the edge of my seat, at least. I just kind of felt like, something is going to go wrong at any given point. He wrote the politics just perfectly, like honestly just perfectly, and I really hope that continues on to the third book, which I think is the final book that I'm going to read in this series, because from what I understand, as I mentioned before, beyond book 3 it gets very weird, and honestly I don't have time for that. Next thing that I really love, that I also mentioned a little bit when I was talking about Paul, was the kind of meta thematic work. The big kind of underlying theme in this book is about what it means to worship a person like a god, and what are the implications of that. And the implication in this book, at least, is that if you worship someone like a god, it can only really lead to doom and destruction, and we really get that sense in this book. It's almost quite atmospheric, this book, because of that, because we have that underlying theme kind of throughout the entire thing. I just really love the kind of political philosophy discussions that were happening, and honestly I would have loved a lot more, because it's just so fascinating. And again, it comes back to what I said earlier, which is that it's because we see it from a different lens. We see it from the lens of somebody who kind of is like a despot. Normally we don't really get that in fantasy unless it's the bad guy, right? And Paul, at least in this book, isn't really portrayed as the bad guy, yet at the end of it we are questioning whether he is. And I love that. I feel like people are probably quite split on that. There were two things that I didn't like about this book. One is that it starts really slow, like really, really slow. I don't mind slow starts, but I feel like when a book is really short, it needs to pick up a lot quicker. And it was just way too slow. And that leads me on to my second point, which is that the book was too short. I would have loved like another 100 pages to really deep dive into some of the conversations that happen. I would have loved to explore what happens beyond the ending. I'm assuming that will be the start of book 3, but I feel like we were just left on this like massive cliffhanger without any real path to resolution. I get it. Like I said, it's so that we pick up book 3, which I definitely will at some point, either this year or next year. But I just wanted more. I wanted more discussions about the philosophy side of things, the politics side of things. I would have just loved to have had a bit more time with these characters, because by the time that I was really kind of getting behind them, the book was ended. So I gave this book a 4.5 stars. I'm still thinking about it, so I feel like maybe I should just bump it up to a 5. I really enjoyed it. Like I really, really enjoyed it. It's one of those books that is very kind of thought-provoking. I actually buddy read this with a friend of mine, shout out to Io, and we were sending each other voice memos as we were reading it, and it is one of those books that lends itself to discussion, and I might do a spoiler-filled review of it at some point, or maybe the first 3 books once I finish the third book. I'm going to read a few quotes. There's quite a few quotes in this book that I really liked, like really, really liked, and I still think about, so we will do that now. I think we'll do 3. Okay, here's the first one. Government cannot be religious and self-assertive at the same time. Religious experience needs a spontaneity which laws inevitably suppress, and you cannot govern without laws. Your laws eventually must replace morality, replace conscience, replace even the religion by which you think to govern. Sacred ritual must spring from praise and holy yearnings which hammer out a significant morality. Government, on the other hand, is a cultural organism particularly attractive to doubts, questions, and contentions. I see the day coming when ceremony must take the place of faith and symbolism replaces morality. I love that quote. It's probably my favorite quote out of this entire book. All right, next one. You can't build politics on love, he said. People aren't concerned with love. It's too disordered. They prefer despotism. Too much freedom breeds chaos. We can't have that, can we? And how do you make despotism lovable? So good. I will do one more, I think, just to round it off. Constitutions become their ultimate tyranny, Paul said. Their organised power on such a scale as to be overwhelming. The constitution is social power mobilised, and it has no conscience. It can crush the highest and the lowest, removing all dignity and individuality. It has an unstable balance point and no limitations. I, however, have limitations. In my desire to provide an ultimate protection for my people, I forbid a constitution. And that's the last one. This book is phenomenal. Really, really good. I think if you've read book 1 and you're debating whether you should read the next book, you absolutely should. It's very much, like I said, an extension of the first book. So I feel like if you read these 2 books, you've really just read the first book. I will be reading book 3, as I mentioned, probably either later this year or next year. I need to buy it. Trying to get through all my physical books at the moment to not much success. But there we have it. Let me know if you've read this book, folks. I loved it and I'm very excited to chat about it, and I'll see you in the next video. Stay safe as always, take care, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.